the simple title sheet of my March 1981 Venice Women's History Tapes, Women in Media Arts. Several women could not attend, but a number did attend. This is the third of the 4 tapes made in March 1981.
Hello, I'm Mary Jane, and I'd like to welcome you all to the Venice Women's History Tapes. Today we have a panel of women in art, women in media art, and I would like to have the women introduce themselves to you. I'd like to begin with Dolores.
Dolores Deluxe. I'm a performing artist and writer, and I've lived in Venice since 1970.
I'm Annie McClune. I'm a rock and roll singer and writer, and I lived in Venice about 3 or 4 years when I haven't been on the road.
I'm Sharon Abramhoff Shipley. I'm a writer, and I've lived in Venice about 10 years.
My name is Amy Halpern. I'm a filmmaker, and I've lived in Venice for about 3 years.
My name is Louise Fitch. I'm an actor. I've lived in Venice for 10 years.
My name is Mary Jane. I'm an actress, and I've lived in Venice about 12 years, 13 maybe.
Barbara Avedon. I've lived in Venice about 10 years. I'm a writer.
Ha, ha, ha. I'm Carol von Diller, and they call me a writer, and I've lived in Venice for about 20 years, but actually I'm a bitch.
I'm Jane Spiller, and I'm a filmmaker, and I've been in Venice for about 8 years.
Most of the women here were given a set of questions to consider, to address themselves to for several minutes here each individually, not the questions individually necessarily, but as individual women. And I'm going to read the questions and then go around and ask each of the women to address themselves to them. Why do you live here? Or why did you live here in Venice for some length of time if you've moved? Why do you feel you have chosen the field you've gone into? What do you feel that it was you initially wished to accomplish in your field? What do you feel you have accomplished? And what would you like now or in the near future to accomplish? How has living and or working here in Venice been beneficial to your own goals or obstructive to your own goals? What conflicts do you perceive around your life in the community of Venice, and how do you deal with these conflicts?
Well, I live in Venice primarily because I love living near the ocean, and it was always a fantasy growing up back east, to just live on the California beaches. And I've been here since 1970. I've lived in San Francisco for a short interval in between that time. But it's always been, for me, in all of Los Angeles area, the only place where I have any sense of feeling for a community. And that's probably the thing that's kept me here longer than the fact that, I'm by the ocean. It's been an easy place for me to raise my child. And, I still prefer living here over any other place I can think of presently. I don't think necessarily that I chose my field. I think it sort of chose me, in a sense. It's just been like a natural evolution of events in my life that led me to be a performer or actor or writer. It's just something that happened in my life around when I was 27 years old, just like a turning point. Before then, I was a stripper, I was a prostitute, I was a student, I was a mother, I was a welfare, hippie, drug addict, dope dealer. I can go on and on and on. So what's left, a lot of things occurred in my life, kind of a lot of tragic things that led me to change. And that change just sort of came out in that way of like being able to express what was happening. I mean, I sort of had a recognition in my life that there was an ability that I had to attract a lot of people to me. There was like an image that I was constantly creating. And when that became sort of a conscious awareness, I realized that that was happening because somehow there was an energy in me that needed to be communicated, and it had been suppressed for so long. You know, as a child, I guess it was a childhood fantasy to want, you know, to be an actor. And it was really repressed because of my background, working class family, Italian father, you know, didn't believe girls should have an education, all of that stuff, you know. And I don't know, at just one point in my life, my daughter, I guess, was 2 or 3. I had lived through a lot of incidences that were very scary. And it was just like an awakening happened. And I would like to be able to have the means to produce my own work at the level I'd like to see it produced. I've done a lot of shows that I've written or in collaboration with other people that have been produced, but on a limited scale because the money was never there. And as a result, the possibility of exposure has been limited because of the circumstances. And I'd like to be able to be in a position in my life where I'd have backing or finance to produce the kind of shows I like to do. The kind of things I write are characterizations of females that are not, you know, in such great shape. Basically, they're women that have had the hard knocks in life. And in one sense, I mean, it sounds weird, I've always had like a warped sense of humor. I see a lot of humor in that. I see humor in the tragedies in my own life. And it's right, are characterizations of females that are not, you know, in such great shape. Basically, they're women that have had the hard knocks in life. And in one sense, I mean, it sounds weird, I've always had like a warped sense of humor. I see a lot of humor in that. I see humor in the tragedies in my own life. And I think that as a comic personality on stage, I like to portray those kinds of women because not only to show ourselves, you know, that we can laugh at the mistakes in our lives or the things we're subjected to, but that we don't have to remain victimized by it, that we can actually, you know, move on. Like in media and film, a lot of times I see films about women that really upset me because there's a trap that's set up and then it ends there, that's it, you know, like there's no hope. And I don't feel that's true for me in my life. And so when I'm performing on stage, that's the kind of communication that I like to, you know, carry through, that there is a hope, that there is some relief, you know, there is a comic relief in life that can carry you through.
I've lived on the East Coast. I was born and raised in Minnesota, and I lived on the East Coast. I've been singing in rock and roll bands for 10 years. It's all I've done except go to school. And I always hesitated about coming to California because I thought of it as earthquakes and Charlie Manson. True. And the image you have from being from the East Coast in California is real strange. And then I wanted to move to California. I wanted to live either in a place like in the movie Chinatown or in the Sandpiper, remember? Yeah. And they had that beautiful, was that Big Sur? Yeah. But it wasn't like that. When I came out here, first place, I was selling hot dogs in Boston, and I got a chance to go on the road for 6 weeks singing backup, which is not what I normally do. But I took it, and I took a little bit of everything I wanted to keep with me, and I just stayed in California, crashed around. Finally, I was staying in Pomona on a couch, which was great. And I had a friend from Boston that stayed in Venice, and I started coming down here and visit. And when it came time to get an apartment, I picked Venice because I loved it, because it was by the sea, number one, and also it was a fun community. Everything else in Los Angeles was so, you know, separated, distant, no neighborhood, no nightlife, no street life. And so that's why I chose Venice. And just stayed here because I like it. It's not enough nightlife, though. I don't think there's enough street life here. In fact, I think it's getting, sometimes it can get a little too insular down here. If you don't get into town enough and find out what's going on, you can just keep to yourself down here too much. But I enjoy roller skating and all that stuff, too. That idea you're saying about having a feeling of giving something to an audience, I've had that. I mean, I made my neighbor cry when I sang Galway Bay once, and it had a big effect on me, you know. Those in my family, we always sang. So I've always wanted to do that. And the reason I came out to California was because the music industry is out here in Los Angeles, and I was singing backup with a guy that had a record out. And so I stayed, and this past year I've been writing and fronting my own band and trying to get, same deal. You want to get the money and the backing to do your own thing, and you have to get the business people to back you up, and that's what I'm trying to do, get a record contract, trying to survive without taking a real job. I worked 2 days last week. It was terrible. I'm not going to do that again. We worked 8 hours, made $23. I hated it. But, so I play at the Blue Lagoon in Venice. That's a lot of fun. But we make $23 and we make $25 a night for 6 people. So, it's just a matter of exposing yourself rather than making a living at it. So I sold a song to a singer, and it's called Ooh Wee. Did you get that close up on that? And I made some money on that, and that's pretty fun. Her name's Nicolette Larson, but I'd rather sing it myself.
Well, I came out to California because I had just graduated from Brandeis, and I was desperate. And I came out for a vacation, and I never went back. And I moved to Venice because it was the only place you can walk around. Every place else in LA, people would go by in cars, and I'd think, I would like to know them, but you can't stop. You can throw yourself out into the wheels, but it's a one-shot deal. And in Venice, it seemed like there were a lot of people, and they were very approachable. And they also had a lot more freedom than I'd ever seen. I was raised in Boston, and I didn't realize what I hadn't had until I came out here. And what I really wanted to accomplish, what I really wanted to do was to escape from my middle-class background and not get married and not have a baby, both of which I did in the past year. And about writing, I've always written, and it just seemed to be more and more into theater, and finally I became a playwright, mostly for revenge. Because once you get in the room and you have the typewriter, you can make the scene over until it sounds exactly the way you wished you had heard it. And you make everybody look exactly the way you saw them. So there's villains and there's angels and everybody is just exactly what you wanted them to be. And I still feel like I'm at the beginning, which is a really nice place to be. I have some adequate command of my craft now, which makes it easier to do things. And I guess what I'd like to accomplish is I'd like to get a show on Broadway while I was living here. That would be my ultimate goal. They have to pay for the hotel. Well, there's a drawback to working in Venice, which is it's really an artistic community, and you get a lot of input from artists, but they also write all your material. Everyone is writing about this very small community, and sometimes I have the feeling that I really like to go live in Tennessee somewhere where nobody is writing and be the only one around that's doing that. But I can't imagine moving, considering that I found everything that I wanted for my life and for my baby and for my husband here.
Hi, my name is Amy Halpern. I'm a filmmaker. And I guess I should say that what I do in film is I shoot my own and light them and make my own films, which by process of, elimination of the fact that everything, describing what I do as a euphemism, are experimental films. That is to say, I pay for them myself, I write them myself. Also, I do cinematography and lighting for part of my living. I've been a typist for a living since I was 16, and I would say that the bulk of the money I've made in my life has been typing. I've done other things. I'm lucky occasionally when I get a day of camera work, which pays more than I would make in many days of typing. At the moment, I have a teaching assistantship at UCLA, where I'm apprenticed to a very fine sound mixer named Richard Portman. I'm a New Yorker. My home cement is Manhattan. And I came here because in Los Angeles, this is the only urban place, or virtually the only urban place. LA is a strange town. If you must be here, it's hard to find humans that are being human in a place where other people are being human. And Venice is urban. There are people on the street. Some of them are sleazy, and some of them are very fine. And there's a soup that comes out of that, an energy that I acknowledge I'm an urban person and I need that. But certainly there's more of almost everything at the beach. More madness, more health. Sounds pretty good. You can pretty much find what you want. If I walk into my house with equipment at night, I am always aware of the state of peril. But being a New Yorker and an urban person and a woman and someone who really enjoys living alone and not having to contend with anybody, there's a certain kind of animal that you become on the street that has lots of radar. And in Los Angeles, on the whole, when I first moved here, I lived in Westwood. And I found that my radar wasn't picking up things. Normally there are people standing in doorways, there are people under the bushes. And here, there were all these marvelous bushes for people to be living in, and no one was on these crafted lawns. So I moved here. I came to Los Angeles because I was making films alone in my apartment in New York with no equipment. Well, by my own oblique methods, which entailed the use of a camera, a set of rewinds, and a projector. No viewer, no work prints, no input. The people that I worked with but didn't discuss what I was doing are people with whom I formed something called the Collective for Living Cinema, which is still operating, incredibly enough, on NEA grants, while the NEA still exists. I found film because when I was little, I went to a lot of films, and I always found that the things that turned me on the most in the movies were not the things the films were about. The moments that knocked me out thoroughly were moments in which something oblique to the picture occurred, the way somebody sighed and looked while something passed by, something like that, rather than somebody killing so-and-so because he had this and they wanted that and then he told that to her. That never really was interesting to me. But when I began to see a lot of films, I found out that the films that I assumed had been made already haven't, and that's why I do it. In Los Angeles, there are a lot more people doing it, and a lot more of them have equipment. UCLA is something which is a fantastic threshold because there's tons of equipment there, not that many people who want to do anything else besides make a living with it. And there's equipment sitting still with nobody using it. For me, that's like ripe fruit sitting on a tree when you're hungry. By some right, it should be used. When I first came out here, I wasn't associated with any organization. I was just like a bag lady in the street with cans of film and a splicer. And I would show up at UCLA, look for an empty room, and find a moviola. And if anybody came and said, "What are you doing here?" "I'm using this space," I would say, "Oh, fine." And I'd get back on the bus. It was pretty infuriating because in LA, it's not, the town isn't crafted for pedestrians. So I just joined the vagrants and the people from the VA on the streets. There's an organization in town called the LA Film Oasis, which I founded with a bunch of people who are also filmmakers. We show experimental films, essentially. That one of the things I'd like to accomplish is more access to experimental work, because I think that the idea of images on a screen with sound is accessible to people who are illiterate, and that's what interests me about it.
Well, I mean, I'm in Venice because I ran away from the Pacific Palisades after being married for 20 years. I've been an actor or actress, today we call ourselves actors, since I was 5 years old, so I don't know any better. I'm still, I've got enough of the middle class hangover that I should take my glasses off even though I can't see you. And I love Venice. I came here because it was here, I guess. I raised my kids in that beautiful white ghetto up on the hill in the Palisades, and I literally ran away from home. My husband wouldn't get out of the house, so I left. You know, it was like that, and I was lucky. I found Venice, and I love the admixture of people, the black and the brown and the poor and the rich and people like me who are neither, and the good friends that I've made, who are most of them sitting around here. And I haven't really accomplished a great deal except that I'm still an actress. I've done nothing else in my whole life. I have never worked at any, it makes me sound kind of dull, Dolores. I was lucky. I wanted to be an actress from the time I can remember, and that's what I've been, and that's what I do. I've never worked at anything else. I've never worked at any kind of a job that was 9 to 5, and thank God, because I don't know what I would do if I had to. I'd go crazy. So that's what I've accomplished is that I'm still here. What I wish to accomplish is to stay here until I'm 100. And keep on sailing and acting enough to make the money so I can keep on sailing and traveling. And I really, I sound like I don't enjoy acting. I do. I have a ball. I don't like the nonsense that goes along with getting jobs, so I don't get the best jobs in the world, but I make enough to...
Put out a little bit. What's the
That's
big deal?
right, and nobody wants what I want to put out anymore, so I got to stick to acting.
God, I'm an actress. I live in Venice. I came here from a myriad series of moves, having lived initially in San Francisco and then in Big Sur and Pacific Grove, and then living in Stockton and Lodi and Sacramento, trying to be married. I did a very good job of trying to be married. I usually do a good job of the things I undertake. Whether they succeed is another question. So I came to Venice. It seemed a very logical place, the only place actually, for me to live by the ocean with my son. And I love the street life here. I require that. And I love New York. And I hope at some point to live on both coasts, bi-coastal, as Peter Allen says. And I like that. I need that. I'm not content to live out in the beautiful Big Sur by myself and have somebody strum guitar casually all day. So I've been acting for a long time now. Most of my acting is stage acting. I've done some film acting. I have done no television acting. And this being the town of television, good luck being a stage actress. I'm here basically most of the time because I love living by the ocean. I swim in the ocean about 9 to 10 months of the year, every day of those months. And I have liked very much raising my son here, who's almost grown. Thank God. Yes, thank you, Barbara. It's been a real struggle. I've had a series of problems. I find it very difficult being a single mother of a son. I think it's an entirely different story to be a single mother of a daughter. But it's all valid. Let's see. I hope to do some television this year, actually. That's what I hope to do. I also hope to do a play that I am in now at the moment, and I hope to do a film this year. That would be nice. Let's see, what can I say? I'm real aware of crime in the streets and crime in the home. I've dealt with both. Lodi.
Okay. Why do I live in Venice? Is that the first question? I don't know. We came down, I guess about 14 years ago, started walking around wondering if we could raise a child here, and found out we couldn't, so we moved down, and he's impossible at this point. So it's true, isn't it true? I don't even know where he is right now. Anyway, I write for television. I was smart enough to get into the business when it was starting, so it was absolutely wide open. The screenwriters thought it would go away, that it was just a fad, and the radio writers got paid much more in radio, so I really kind of just waltzed in, and I've been working ever since. It's about 30 years now in television. And for everybody here who is trying to get more stuff out, there's going to be such a marvelous expansion of the industry so shortly with all of the new technologies. Once this strike is over with the writers and directors, that is just going to be wide open and everything will sell. That's my prediction! They'll be able to make their money back fast with smaller audiences because they'll have some kind of pay concept and people will pay for it, and it's better than the advertisers paying for it and being controlled. And it's just going to be a wonderful, expanding, exciting time for people in the arts. So, that's it.
Is there anything you'd like to accomplish, Reverend, specific?
I want to get married.
Again.
I've lived in Venice for about 20 years, and I came down here, I guess much for the same reason those people over there whose names I have now forgotten because I've never met them before in my life, forgotten. And that was because it was the only urban area in Los Angeles. I was married and I lived in Topanga Canyon, which was just, about, Dante's Inferno. I mean, I couldn't stand walking around there with all those ladies in their Madras skirts and their Guatemalan sandals and their homemade, organically grown bread. Yeah, well, Barbara, sometimes you say smart things at the expense of being wise. True. But I came down here. I came down here because, I'm not a fancy dresser, and wait. I think that's really tacky, Barbara. Okay. Because I'm not a fancy dresser, and one of the reasons in Venice is that when I came here, of course this is changing now, it didn't really matter. People were walking around and they were the outcasts. Most of the people I knew were, quote, the outcasts. People in Santa Monica would say, oh, you live in Venice, ha ha ha, flush the toilet, Venice needs the water, That was one of the jokes, Any kind of violence that happened within a 30-mile radius, it always happened 2 blocks away from the gas house, they mentioned the gas house no matter where it happened in Venice, And I came down here because it was sinister, and I came down here because there were a lot of interesting, evil people who lived here, and I'm really unhappy now because I see this kind of pasteurization and homogenization of Venice. Well, I guess I've expressed myself about Venice, and one time in about 1967 or 1968, the only date I can really remember is 1066, but for some reason, 476, something or other fell, but AD. but I felt. I was walking down the street and I walked into this place that manufactured posters. And as I turned around, there were all of a sudden there were policemen wandering in. Hell, they came in and it was a bust, And these people were making posters. That's all they were doing. And these policemen came in and they started looking in everything, They started doing things, and rousting people, and I walked out, I just walked out, and there was some idiot from the Evening Outlook at that time who took a picture of me, and I told him that if he took a picture, if that picture were published, I'd cram it, where the sun don't shine. And he said, and one of the policemen said to me, well, if you want to stay out of jail, stay out of Venice. And I said, nobody tells me to move, and that's been my attitude ever since. At that point, there was this man, John Haig, who came along, and he said, my God, they're busting people, they're arresting people, and he started explaining certain political facts of life that I really wasn't aware of. At that point, I wanted to be an actress. And I was becoming more and more disinterested in acting, because, well, one time I was at a party and we were talking about Khrushchev, and somebody came up to me and he said, oh, is he gay? And I thought, this is the wrong bunch, But so I thought, well, so there was this, well, that's because he took off his shoes. But at any rate, I became more and more involved in the politics of kind of staying alive in Venice, and of making sure that those people didn't get, people who were getting arrested in Venice were not people who were committing any crimes except by not being a snappy dresser, hyar, and no, you probably wouldn't, Barbara. But And if you did, you'd probably have a good lawyer. That was another thing. Yeah, right. You know, well, a lot of people didn't do that. See, I didn't have any middle-class background that I was trying to escape from, and I long gave up having a middle-class background to escape to. You know, I couldn't make it. You know, I couldn't make it being middle class. I tried. Suddenly, people needed a communication system because none of the communication system in the television at that time, or the Evening Outrage, or the Los Angeles Times really gave an accurate picture of what people were trying to do in Venice, which was to establish the fact that low-income people had the right to live in Venice as much as, and more than, you know, the affluent people who were moving in, the more middle-class people who were moving in, who were just thirsting for this wonderful piece of, quote, undeveloped property, raw land, as the real estate people call it, raw land, even though there might be 20 little shacks on there with, 30 illegal aliens, or maybe people who've been living there for years and years and years, but that's raw land because it's not a condominium and it's not paying $30 million a year or whatever in taxes. A woman walking down the street here in Venice lately doesn't have a right to walk down the street. They're just as oppressed. You know, I sometimes feel like, quote, an undocumented or an illegal alien walking down the street in Venice at night. You know, what are you doing out here at night, lady? You must be asking for something. You know, so and I'm not. I'm an insomniac, and I like to walk. You know, but. So I became more and more interested in that, and somehow or other I found myself writing for a paper that was also started by a movement called the Peace and Freedom Party, which was started in Venice, and was started by a great many men, you know, and women. And for the first time in my life, I really did find a sense of community. And I found myself writing about things that really mattered to me, and I really found myself being more and more involved in this neighborhood and my community. And because I don't own anything in Venice, I feel all of Venice is mine, you know, in a certain horrible, mystical sense, if you're going to use that kind of word. What I want to accomplish in Venice is that I would like more public access to the beach. I would like low-income housing. I would like people to be treated with dignity no matter what they do or how they do it. I would like respect for other people's privacy and other people's space. Personally, I would like to write something about Venice. I certainly don't want to become another Sarah Davidson who do little things like, well, real estate is to the 80s what pot is to the 60s, you know, which is ridiculous. And she was also billed, I think, in some writer's workshop as Sarah Davidson, the person who did for the women's movement what Tolstoy did for Russia, you know. And I don't want to become that, you know. I want to really get over my writer's block, you know, and at this point, and write something really good about Venice. And Venice to me is a bunch of people that have lived around in Venice for a long time, and what pisses me off is that a lot of them are being moved out, you know, and this is really scary to me. And when they, you know, and I'm just hanging on right now by my nails, really, and I'd like to have some time, yes, a little property in Venice where I can own my own house and grow my herb gardens and my gladioli and my rose bushes and have my 2 cats and not worry about the next day. I don't want to become, you know, terribly, terribly rich. I want to have enough money so that I can go to the Rose Cafe and buy 3 pounds of coffee or something like that, you know.
I didn't want to come to Los Angeles. I had gone to school in Berkeley, grown up in Northern California, and moved to Colorado, and decided that I wanted to work in the field of the environment and that filmmaking might be the best avenue for me to make some kind of a personal statement. Then I decided I needed to go to film school, and LA seemed like the only good alternative, so I ended up in Los Angeles totally against my wishes, and found myself in a totally different environment that I'd never experienced before. A friend found a cottage in the Venice canals, and I moved there because it reminded me of living in the country, and the rest of Los Angeles intimidated me. So I lived there for about 8 years. And I found something very special there. It wasn't, it was a very kind of an unusual, free way to live. where people didn't really judge other people, and you could pretty much do whatever you wanted to do, go your own way, or get together with your neighbors, and I just liked it. And then I was lucky to find a real good job in Venice, working for a designer named Charles Ames, and he had a studio. I was absolutely astounded to find out that it was in Venice, and I ended up working for him for about 3 years. So that kept me here a little while longer, and then I got real interested in putting down some roots, and was real interested in building a house. I looked for some property for a long time. Finally, I found a little lot, and I found a very unusual architect who wanted to build something in Venice because he builds very unusual things, and the only place he could think of where he could really build anything he wanted was Venice. And so he got involved with me in this project, and I spent the last 4 years trying to get a house built. And so now I'm a Veniceite, sort of by default. Usual struggling filmmaker, doing some intensive writing and attempts to get things produced. I'm primarily interested in public television right now. I have a program which is sort of halfway through, which is a public television program. And I also have an animation camera service where I provide that service to other people in my attempts to earn a living that way. The kind of films that I like to do are films that incorporate historical perspective with contemporary issues. I really I have very strong feelings about different things. I like to make films which make statements. I lived in the canals for a long time. Now I'm living over near the beachfront, and suddenly it's a very dense neighborhood, totally different atmosphere. And I'm very involved with my neighbors in organizing a block group. None of us have really known each other, and we're trying to find out who our neighbors are and sort of develop a stronger sense of neighborhood on the Horizon Westminster area. And I find it's really very rewarding, very interesting.
Janice Udell, and I'm an artist, and I do video. And I help make half-inch video equipment available for community access to be used as a tool for organizing in different ways, mainly. And I'm from Chicago. That's half my home, really. Or, I would never go back there, I don't think, but I really feel it's sort of my home. But I just came here to live with a friend. And we just lived here because there was so much smog everywhere else, and then the ocean and everything. Except just recently, I was thinking, I always thought the ocean was, like space, freedom. But just recently, it started to feel like it was this wall, so I don't know. I mean, it used to always seem like it was this place to space out into, I mean, I've never go swimming because I'm very afraid of sharks, but just to go to the beach and, look out, and I'm a very paranoid person. I mean, maybe living here makes you more paranoid. I can't figure it out. But I think I would only want to live in a place where there's some community organization or some people like me already, or some Jews or some brown people or some, just weird people or some, nice people or what, not just some little place somewhere, with all the houses or even in the pretty mountains with all the, little towns. That freaks me out. So I think, I feel like more comfortable in some way here, even though I feel very paranoid here, and I feel more and more paranoid. I mean, I know I only make friends with other people who are paranoid.
I always was very liberal politically, and as I get older and I have, family now and things, I feel much more conservative. And I'm really astounded to see how many people are inflexible in the liberal community. Because I was one of the people that stood on the bridges and the canals and said, they're trying to move us out. And it didn't occur to me for a long time that maybe what I should do is change so I can stay, instead of making them stop doing what they were doing so I could remain the same. And I'm real pleased with the changes I've seen so far. And it's been really interesting and challenging, making sure that each time Venice goes through one of its major upheavals, which seem to be moment to moment lately, I managed to make enough change in my life so I get to stay. And it feels like a privilege more than a right to me now.
Well, I would like to speak to that. I think it's very easy to say, we stay, and I'll change, so we stay. I happen to be one of these. As I get older, I get more radical. I mean, that's all very well and good. And I'm not really talking about me, because I lucked out, and I am able to live in this lovely little house that I bought when I did, that I can afford, and I have enough. I'm not rich, but I'm not poor, and I won't be poor. But there are a lot of people, an awful lot of people that I see now and that I saw when I first moved here, who aren't able to do what you have decided you can do, Sharon. And I really take exception to the attitude that why don't people change so they can live in Marina City or something. You know, I'm going to the other extreme, and I realize it. But I think it's something that you, as a younger person who has a life before you, and you have children and everything, and I know that you want to make it good for your children, must take into account and must remember that there are those who are in a trap, and they cannot make it better. So we have to help them stay if we can. We have to do all we can, not just for ourselves, but for somebody else. That's all.
I am content. I'm not married. I don't have a child. I got pregnant for the first time this year. I'm 27. It seems like part of me wants a kid. I'm not ready to do that. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't put a child in competition with the film I'm making now. It's true. I don't know. I wouldn't put that person in that position. Because I wouldn't do that now anyway. When I get my salary, the first money goes to the rent, and the second money goes to my lab. There's a woman who lived directly over me who had just like a terrible situation with a guy who pulled a knife on her. It was a gun. At 5 in the afternoon on Horizon last year. 5 in the afternoon, she was coming home from work, she stepped off her bus, she was holding her groceries. And she saw the guy, and it didn't move fast enough, and he pulled a knife on her, and she said, "Look, I'm a sick woman, I will do anything you ask, just don't hurt me." And it didn't help. He knocked her unconscious before he abused her in more ways than I care to get into. We can each imagine. It was pretty bad, and she had lots of stitches and lots of interesting places.
Like he said, flush the toilet. Venice needs water. Frank Bennett, who owns the Townhouse, which is the bar, yeah. He told me a story of like 20 years ago, someone getting shot in that bar, and the paramedics not coming down for a half hour. Now that man's a very conservative man. He is no... But he's just said very offhandedly, he says, the police, this is Venice, let him bleed to death.
Now what I see is a reaction. I see people, forming little neighborhood block parties, and people that I used to know, not block parties, pardon me, block organizations. And that's fine. People should get to know their neighbors. We didn't have to do that back, 10 years ago we didn't have to do it. We knew it. There were all kinds of people. They helped us, and we helped them. And that's neighborhood. And that's, that to me was Venice culture. More people are getting more uptight because there's a housing problem not only in Venice and not only in Los Angeles, but all over the country. And those people, some of them can't change, like Louise said. They're in traps, and some of them, let's face it, honey, we need to carry our water, and we need to watch our children while we do our creative little thingies, We need those people around, and they need to be here because they can't afford, they can't afford to take their little car that's always in tip-top condition and, and drive to watch your children and watch your house while you are away, doing some lab work or writing or, whatever. You have got to, you realize that, and you need, quote, the poor, those people who aren't quite as hip and cute and sweet and creative as some of us here, or some of us people here,
Yes, we need to change. We're always changing. It's life.
You resent the fact that you walk down the street and a man assumes that you're hooking or something, of course. But the thing I want to say as artists, what we can do is we can present, and I think probably what we all do, is present strong images of women or whatever, of nonviolence or whatever, in our art, like write songs, and I try to avoid the, oh, he hurt me again, and I'm miserable syndrome, I refuse to write songs like that. And I also don't want to write what they call cock rock songs either. It's a unique, strong female perspective in my songs and the way I present myself on stage, without being, too, what I'm trying to say. Too beautiful. I don't want to be too beautiful.
Having lived here and done an immense amount of political work, immense amount of community organization and cultural organization at different times. And I think the changes that have happened here economically, which have happened other places, except they've happened in a microcosm here. And I feel a lot of the changes are very in support of community life, which I feel is a viable reason for living anywhere. It's one thing to own things and have speculative money, and what I feel has come in here is speculative money, and you have either conglomerates of corporations or conglomerates of people buying up, and they're not really living here, they're renting it out, or they live a year, or a couple of them live there a year, and then they sell it, and it trades very quickly. My way of dealing with it is to be maintaining an attitude of change that, all this change is happening, and a lot of it I don't like. Some of the little things I like occasionally, a lot of it I don't like. But that I have to keep up the vanguard. What is that? There's some kind of saying about there's liberty, but it takes constant guarding. You have to be vigilant. It's constant vigilance, right? Eternal vigilance, and I think that's one of those truisms that's true. At any rate, I don't own anything here, and it's been very hard, and I do wonder how I'm going to survive next year. I also wonder constantly from week to week how I survive. But I think that the vigilance is the most important thing, and I agree with Louise, not to negate what Sharon did say about changing, but I think that there's a sense of community vigilance and a community keeping up with everything, that's all. The sense of history that I got even doing the research on women in art as a total factor in women in media art, specifically for this panel, was that there, in the 1950s, at least in Venice, and I have a feeling pretty much all over the country, there were not any women artists. There were lots of men artists, a great deal of writers and poets, of course. And they had their wives or their sisters or their lovers or whatever, their mothers. But, and not to negate the work that the women did as individuals or the artwork that they may have done and or attempted to do, but they did not have an identity as an artist, and they didn't call themselves an artist, and it never occurred to them to think to produce their own writing or get their own writing published when their husbands were getting it. Pardon me? Okay. At any rate, it's real interesting to see the kinds of changes that have happened, that have gone down, not only here in Venice, but as a national kind of across-the-board thing. It's slow. I don't think that it's as open in Dubuque, Iowa, as it is here for women necessarily breaking away from their traditional roles, but on the other hand, it happens every place. And it's been real interesting to see that it was not until really about 1968, I would say, that women artists came about much more openly here in Venice.
A classic point. I have been an actress, as I said before, since I was 5 years old. But I came from this middle-class background where everybody, and I don't resent them because they love me very much and they've always been very supportive. But it was you were always expected to get married, and you know, whatever you chose to do, you were going to do that till you got married. And even after I was married and continued being an actress and continued earning my living at it, when people would ask me what I did, I would sort of go like this, squish down my chin, and I'd say, I act. And then really, no, this is true. And in that same vein,
I did it.
as when I ran away from home and I moved to Venice, and people say, what do you do? I say, I'm an actress, because that's what I am, and that's what I've been all my life.
Right.
But it took that long to do it. And it's kind of interesting that all of you who are younger don't have to go through that soul searching, that it isn't soul searching, that's a dumb word.
Yeah.
But anyway, that process, and I think it's wonderful that you can be what you are and do what you do without trying to pretend that you're a million other things or like somebody else.
I just wanted to say something for the women in Dubuque who we write to through Another Mother for Peace, because they are just where we are. It's amazing. Politically, they are together. Everybody's relating well. It's equally dangerous also all over, so you might as well feel just as safe here as any place else and just go about your business and not worry about it.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody. It's really quite an experience for me to be together with everybody, and I think for all of us. And when the tapes are ready, I'll let you all know.